Hey everyone, it's your resident Madman Biggs back again for another video. Today, we're going to start off the video with some mail. I got a special little present, came all the way down from way down south in New Orleans, Louisiana. And it was a super cool, extremely thoughtful gift, and we're going to open that up first. And by doing so, that opened up a whole new can of worms, and we're going to talk about something pretty cool and fishy, and I even brought in a real expert to talk about it today, so hopefully you guys will stay tuned. And now, if you're as fascinated as I am by the incredible diversity of life that surrounds us, then you truly belong here with me. I make videos on all facets of nature. Reptiles, isopods, insects and arachnids, aquariums and vivariums, all sorts of DIY projects, unique plants. I try to dig a little bit deeper into the science behind it all. So if you haven't already, please consider hitting that subscribe button as well as ringing that notification bell, and you'll always be kept up to date when I upload new content. Let's get to it. All right, mail call. Got a nice little package here. Came in the mail from a dear friend, Pete Logedice, down in New Orleans. Came all the way up here, all the way to Canada. So let's see what it is. It took probably took about a month and a half to get here from New Orleans with everything going on in the world right now. But no idea what it could be. Little box. Very well packaged. George's gift. Very well packaged. And it's from Pete, Teresa, Corrine, and PJ. Oh, that's beautiful. It's an ornament. It's a Cajun ornament. It's a white poinsettia flower. And I think it's made, yes, it is. This is super cool, Pete. This is made out of real Louisiana garfish scales. The entire ornament is made out of scales from fish. Now, garfish, they're an extremely primitive fish, and they have a type of scale called Ganoid Scales. And they form a real tough barrier, almost like an armor. This is exceptionally cool. Thank you very much, Pete, and your family for the wonderful, thoughtful Christmas present. All the best, guys. Thank you. So I'm thinking, if we're going to talk about Ganoid scales, garfish, primitive fish, let's get into it a bit more detail, and I thought even better, let's call in an expert. I got a perfect guy for this job. Let's go. All right, my friends, I told you guys we're going to talk about something a little unique here, so I thought instead of Biggs always just rattle at you, I thought I'd bring an actual expert into the field. This is a good friend of mine from many years back. Short story, but honestly, this guy is one of the people that are instrumental in getting me into fish. We worked together as friends at a pet store. We went exploring a lot of the native rivers. I seem to remember several times I got the leaky hip waders when we went collecting using the electroshock equipment. Maybe that's part of the result of why I am the way I am. But this is my friend, everybody. This is Mr. Gavin Hankey. He is the curator of vertebrate zoology at the Royal BC Museum. And I thought this would be a real cool time to kind of talk what makes these scales really unique compared to other fish scales. Or even more important, maybe we should start at the beginning. And what is a fish scale? Like, what's the purpose behind it?
Well, a fish scale, I mean, it's armor. It's a mineral resource. Basically, they're storing minerals in the bone. And it's camouflage, so it's really their outside protection, and not just physically, but visually as well. My work from my PhD, everything that people thought they knew about early shark scales, for example, I had to throw it out the window, because when you had the scales and then you looked at the body, the patterns that we originally used and relied on didn't work. So I kind of muddied the water instead of clarifying it. So I'm not sure if I'm popular in the fish world anymore because of that, but So,
Well,
so be it, right?
I know for certain that you and me, we're going to do another video down the road. We're going to maybe go a little bit more in depth into different types of scales or fish or something like that. But I also really, really want to do a video with you talking about that shark that we talked about earlier and stuff. But let's get
Yeah.
back to what we're actually talking about today. Now, besides all the myriad of different types of scales, the scales that we're talking about that this ornament is made out of is a weird type of scale, and it's not a super, super common scale. It's called a ganoid scale. And what makes them unique?
Well, it's not common anymore.
Okay.
You know, the groups of fish with ganoid scales are pretty limited today. Historically, there were a lot of fish with ganoid scales. The earliest bony fish had ganoid scales. So it's a real reduction. And modern fish with their ctenoid and cycloid scales, a naked skin, for example, they've sort of taken over. Ganoid scales are quite rare now. The gars, paddlefish have little tiny scales. I think it's on the base of their tail. Bichirs, they've got the ganoid scales as well. Sturgeon also have scutes as well as scales, but yeah, there's only a few fish with them now.
And these are all the fish that are in the aquarium trade, at least, are referred to as primitive fish because of that, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So what is a ganoid scale comprised of?
It basically, to look at a ganoid scale, they're rhombic shaped with a little peg to help them interlock in the skin. They have growth layers internally, so they grow with the fish, unlike shark scales, where sharks they'll grow more scales instead of making a specific scale bigger. Okay. So in that sense, it's a lot like a cycloid scale or a ctenoid scale, because the ganoid scales will grow, but they form the most effective armor ever. So you said your ornament was alligator gar scales?
I believe so. Yeah, it comes from Louisiana, from Cajun country.
Yeah, my master's supervisor, he was telling me that when he was down in the Gulf doing his research, to kill an alligator gar, they used a 30-30. They would shoot them. Yeah, I mean, and if they didn't get a clean shot, it would bounce off. Like that is, you can't get a filleting knife into that. It's amazing, solid armor.
I've got a friend in Ohio, Cleveland, Ohio. It's the Ohio Fish Rescue, and they've converted. They've grown and grown and grown. I've been there almost every year, and every time I go back, they're like a third larger. And they've actually taken their indoor Olympic-sized swimming pool, and they had a massive company come and convert it to a fully functional, gigantic, naturalized pool. Like the whole bottom of the entire swimming pool is a filtering system. And they have arapaima and red-tailed cats, and they have a couple of these alligator gars. And I've swam with them. Like the alligator gar was probably the most intimidating one. And at that stage, it was only about 4 feet in length. It still is an insanely intimidating fish to see close up. And I actually made the thumbnail of that video, Monsters in the Deep, and it's like it's right here beside me. Its head's this big. But yeah, an 11-foot monster in Louisiana, pulling that out of the river would be pretty impressive. Ganoid scales, I'm just looking at some of my notes that I have here. They're covered with a hard layer of enamel like dentine. So these scales are actually more formed in the same way like teeth. Is that true?
Yes. Yeah, scales are basically the same sort of material as teeth. Scales are also sensitive. Like when you get a damage on your tooth, you feel it, right?
Yes.
Dentine is a sensitive tissue, and that goes back millions of years. It's quite functional in that respect. So yeah, it's the same sort of material that you'll find in teeth. Depending on the fish, you'll have an enamel-like layer as well as the dentine below it. So teeth are complicated, as are scales, and there's blood supply to larger scales like a ganoid scale just to help it grow. Amazingly complex structures.
Yeah, people just they see a fish and they just peel the scales off. They think it's not much to it, but there's a lot more to it when you look at it a little closer.
If you took a goldfish and you pull the scale off, the majority of the scale is hidden. Most of what you see as a scale on the surface is not even a third of the actual scale's circumference. The scale sinks quite deep into the skin.
Into the tissues, yeah.
Yeah.
Ganoid ones, other than that peg structure that you mentioned, ganoid scales are completely on the surface.
Well, there's still an underside that's going to have blood vessel connection and everything. So, but yeah, what you see is like that cobblestone pavement is at the surface. Yeah.
Okay.
The ganoid plates, scutes and things like that are also in sturgeon. So those little ridge scales that you see on sturgeon.
Yes.
So those are also the same sort of material.
Yeah. Again, another type of armor, right?
Another type of armor. Yeah. I mean, if you grab a small sturgeon and it thrashes, you're going to know about it. Yeah. So yeah, it's purely defensive. maybe a little bit of hydrodynamics as well. I can't imagine the interlocking tiles for scales on a gar is much for hydrodynamic function, because they're just floating there like logs for the most part. And even a bashir or reed or ropefish, crawling along the bottom, they're slow. They wouldn't be
They got
any real use.
Little tiny fins on the side.
Yeah.
Well, there you have it, friends. If you wanted to know anything more about Ganoid scales, I think we delivered it. Maybe you guys can take a look at your primitive fishes like your bashirs and your gars and your ropefish and stuff. Some which we can't keep in Canada, obviously, but the ones that you see down in the US or in Europe, maybe take a little bit closer look at, maybe have a bit more appreciation for it. So as always, my friend, thank you, Gavin, for joining us. Everyone, take care.